Tonight, we returned to the fifth letter from Mike. The locals warned him never to go inside. He went in anyway. What he found there was something he still cannot explain. This is Three Incense Sticks. 3 red towers rose out of the overcast sky over Saigon. It looks tall and slender. The red walls were fading. The locals call them the Three Incense Sticks. I had heard the name before I came. I stood across the street and wiped the sweat off my forehead. The air was wet and hot, and it pressed on my face. I had seen too many so cold haunted houses around the world, but the empty plaza still pressed on me. I had come to Saigon to film the building. I had planned it for a week. The plan did not cover what happened inside. The towers were too thin for their height, leaning little in the wind, or maybe not leaning. I stood and looked at them, and I could not decide. The street was busy. Motorbikes went past in line. No one crossed the street toward the plaza, and people walked around it. A woman selling fruit had her cart at the edge of the plaza. She did not look at the building, and she did not look at me when I stood there. The heat came off the pavement in waves. I had been standing in it for 10 minutes before Lei spoke. I had seen that kind of quiet before. It comes around certain buildings. People decide not to look. I have never learned to decide not to look. I'm not going in. Lei shook his head. He dropped his half-smoked cigarette and ground it out with his boot. Mike, trust me. It has been empty for 20 years. There is a reason. You took my dollars, Lei. I patted the camera hanging on my chest. I only bring you to the door. Lei pointed at the glass door, chained with a chain thick with red rust. There is no power inside. The corridors are narrow. The ceilings are low. You'll feel you can't breathe. The old people say something buried under the foundation sucks the air out of people. He had been the one to tell me about the building the night before over beer in the backpacker street. He had told me about the 3 towers and the name people gave them. I asked him if he would take me. He said yes. He said it slowly. I should have heard how slowly he said it. Saying nothing, I took the bolt cutters out of my pocket. The chain was old, the rust coming off on my hands. The glass door was dirty, and behind it was nothing but dark. I cut through one link, and the chain fell in 2 pieces on the step. The sound the loudest on the street for a moment. Lei stepped back 2 paces, waved his hand, and turned toward the stall at the corner, lighting another cigarette before he got there. He did not look back. I pushed the door open and went in. The door closed slowly behind me, cutting off the noise of the motorbikes outside. The air changed at once. There was no wind, only a heavy smell of wet cement, and mold mixed with the sour smell of rotting plants. The lobby was a corridor, a stairwell, and the dark of a place that had not seen light in years. I stood in it for a moment before turning on the flashlight. I do not know why I waited. The door did not lock behind me. I did not check if it did. The ceilings were very low. At 1.85 meters, I raised my hand and touched the rough ceiling. Pipes ran along it, black against the dark, and I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut a path through the absolute dark. The first floor was an abandoned mall. The counters were still there, empty glass cases, dust on the tops. The dust was even. No one had walked there in a long time. Broken plastic mannequins lay on their sides, clothes gone, bare limbs pale in the light. A woman's mannequin stood near the escalator, one arm missing, facing the door. It would have faced a customer once. I walked past it, and I do not know why I remember the mannequin. My footsteps echoed in the empty hall. They were too clear. I climbed the dry escalator with its cracked rubber handrail and frozen steps. The light from my hand going up the walls ahead of me. The escalator ended on the 2nd floor, the same as the first, empty cases. Dust. The air was lower here. It was heavier, snap. I stopped. The sound had not come from the building settling. I know the sounds buildings make, and this was not one of them. It was late sound. Wet cloth scraping on cement. It stopped when I stopped. I did not turn around, standing still and steadying my breathing. Slow breath. Steady heart. My rule from years of exploring. Most sounds that make no sense are the building itself. I kept going. Second floor. Third floor. The corridors narrowed around rooms divided too small, and the doorways stood black and open. Most of the doors were off. The ones that had doors stood ajar. I counted them as I passed. I do not know why I counted. I went into one room, smaller than the hall of a house. The window was bricked over with bricks newer than the walls. Someone had bricked it up after the building was built. I have thought about what that means. On the wall was half a peeled talisman. The vermilion characters had been eaten by the damp into black-brown. I held the light on it for a long time. I could not read it. I could not tell if the characters had been written there to protect the room or to hold something in it. A chill came from behind, the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned fast, and the flashlight swept the corridor. Nothing. Only dust floating in the beam. The feeling did not leave. The thing was close. In the shadow of a doorway, or the gaps between the pipes overhead. I heard a faint breathing, wet, heavy, with a stickiness I could not place. It was close enough that I could have touched it if I reached out. I did not reach out. It was not a rhythm I could follow. It breathed in and held, and then let out. I also held my own breath and listened, but the breathing did not stop. Mine did. I do not know how long I stood there. The dust went on turning in the beam. The breathing went on. My palms were wet. The camera's red light blinked in the dark. I took one step forward, the camera still recording at my side. A mirror at the end of the corridor caught the flashlight. There was no reason for a mirror in a corridor still. There was one, old, the glass cloudy at the edges. The beam crossed the edge of the mirror, and in its corner I saw a dark red cloth. Behind me, in the mirror, I was not wearing red. I turned sharply, the light hitting the corner. Only a thick support column, rough rebar showing through peeled paint. I had seen it wrong, but the sting of being watched stayed, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The invisible presence had not left. Close against the wall in a folded posture no human body could make, looking down at me from above. The ceiling pipes were above me. The thing was between them and the wall. I do not know how I knew that. I knew it. The smell of mold turned into the smell of blood. I did not scream or run. Slowly I lowered the flashlight to the floor. In the dust there was line of fresh footprints, twisted shapes with the toes pulled long and wet, running to my feet less than half a meter from my boot tips. They were not boot prints and not bare feet. The footprints were growing. Slap. Another wet mark printed itself in the dust, before my eyes. One step away. I did not look up, did not want to see what stood over the footprints, and kept the light on the floor. A third one came, closer. My breath came short. Some part of me said step back, but the flashlight stayed fixed on the empty air. I counted the prints. 7 of them. 5 when I first looked. I did not trust the count, so I counted again. 7. The prints were wet and shone in the light, but there was no water in the building. The pipes were dry. I stepped back. The cold smell of blood stepped forward with me. I turned and ran for the stairs. Concrete, wet in places. I did not stop to look at the wet. I ran down fast, the light from my hand shaking on the stained walls. Behind me, the sound followed. Wet cloth on cement. Closer, clearer. I do not remember finding the stairs. I remember the stairs. Faint street light coming through the gap in the glass door. I ran at the door, did not slow down, and hit it with my shoulder. It opened. I burst out into the wet Saigon night, stopped, and turned, leaning on my knees to gasp. The motorbikes, the heat, the noise of the city, it all came back at once. Across the street, at the stall, Lay looked up at me, his face white. He had a cigarette in his hand, unlit. He had been watching the door the whole time. He did not say anything, just waited for me to say something. Straightening slowly, I wiped the sweat from my forehead and looked up at the Three Incense Sticks in the black window on the second floor. In the leftover glow of the flashlight, a blurred shape stood at the window, a person watching me under the streetlight. I raised the camera and filmed it. I do not remember pressing the button. The shape I remember, lowering the camera, I could not tell if it could see me, and it did not move. From my pocket I took a pack of cigarettes and lit one. The flame flashed across my face. "Let's go," I said to Lay, who had run over. He stood close to me. I blew out a puff of smoke. He looked at the building over my shoulder. I finished the cigarette. The shape was still in the window. I looked at it once more and I did not look again. Lay and I walked back down the street. Neither of us spoke. "What did you see?" Lay asked. His face was pale. "Nothing." I pressed the stop button on the camera and threw the cigarette down, grinding it out. "But someone lives in there." The footage I have watched since. It shows something, and I cannot say what. What I saw, I can tell you. I have not been back to that street.